Hi, my name's Maura, and 3 nights ago at Christmas dinner, my sister stood up, slammed her glass down, and screamed across the table, "Give back the $90,000, or you'll never see Mom and Dad again." No warning, no explanation, just a public execution of me. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been planning it quietly for months behind my back, with my mother sitting there, saying nothing like I deserved it. And while they laughed, accused, and humiliated me, I reached into my purse calmly and placed something on the table that changed everything. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment below. I read everyone because sometimes the real betrayal doesn't explode. It whispers until it breaks you, or they think it did. Christmas Eve in San Jose always felt quieter than the rest of the country. Maybe it was the gentle coastal breeze, or the way the lights on the palm trees didn't quite match the chill in the air. I pulled up to my mother's house at 6:15 p.m. Sharp just as planned, parking behind my sister's gleaming white SUV that was slightly crooked in the driveway, as if it owned the place. I held a canvas bag of handmade gifts in one arm, my purse clutched tight in the other. Inside my purse was a folded piece of paper, a short speech I'd written at midnight last night. A thank you to my parents for everything they'd done over the years. A moment of gratitude, I thought. Maybe even healing. The porch light flickered once as I approached the door. Mom opened it before I even knocked. "Maura," she said plainly. No hug, just my name, clipped at the edge. I stepped inside. The smell of cinnamon rolls and glazed ham wrapped around me familiar, and almost enough to make me forget what came next. The dining room was already set. Silver cutlery name cards and soft gold cursive embossed napkins. Everything perfect. My eyes swept the table. "Where's mine?" I asked softly. "Oh," Mom turned. "Astria said you liked the corner seat. You know, to be more comfortable." She gestured toward the folding chair at the end of the buffet cabinet. No table setting, no name tag, just space. I slid the chair closer to the table gently as not to cause a scene. But Astria saw, and she made sure everyone else did too. "Oh, Maura always likes to be low-key, right, sis?" she said with a laugh that felt like a trap. People chuckled. Even Uncle Dean shook his head and smiled like it was all harmless. I forced a small laugh too, the kind that hides behind your teeth. That chair. It didn't just feel temporary, it felt conditional. Dinner unfolded with the usual chatter. Wine stories I wasn't part of, and glances that flicked past me like I was furniture. I focused on the centerpiece, a candle holder I'd given Mom years ago. She never acknowledged where it came from. She never had to. When it came time for the toasts, Dad cleared his throat and raised his glass. He gave Estrella a nod, and she stood with confidence I'd never seen questioned. Her speech was filled with flair and jokes that everyone loved. When she sat, I stood. Just a few words, I began holding my glass and reaching for the microphone beside me. It didn't turn on. I tapped it, flipped the switch. Nothing. Astria leaned over with exaggerated concern. "Oh no, I guess the battery's dead. Guess it wasn't meant to be." She shrugged, all innocence. Laughter again this time, softer, more awkward. People weren't sure whether to feel sorry for me or embarrassed on my behalf. I folded the speech, slipped it into my purse, and sat down. My wine glass was now empty. Someone had taken the bottle down the other end of the table. As the meal ended, it was time for gifts. Each year we did a small family exchange. I'd prepared something special. A scrapbook of Dad's last few years, the hospital visits, the letters he'd written, photos only I had. I'd stayed up 3 nights assembling it. Lorraine opened the gift with slow hands. "Oh, Astria, this is beautiful," Mom said, her voice caught between awe and disbelief. I froze. My sister looked up, wide-eyed and smiling. "I just thought it was time we honored his memory." "Right," she said, then added, "It came to me just last week. She didn't even bother to pretend she made it. She just claimed it." The scrapbook sat open in Mom's lap. She turned to the page with Dad's letter to me. The one I'd hidden under a folded flap. My handwriting was still on the corner, dated 6 months ago. No one noticed, or if they did, no one said anything. Dad's eyes flicked toward mine. A glance, nothing more. My hands curled under the table. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter that gifts were just symbols, that intentions were louder than applause. But it did matter, and the silence around it was screaming. That was when the fog in my memory began to lift. This had happened before more times than I could count. The family tree photo from 2 years ago, where my name was left off the caption. The time they asked Astria to read at church, even though I'd written the poem. The tribute at Dad's memorial. My part cut, hers added last minute. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was a pattern. It was a quiet campaign. And tonight, it was louder, sharper, more intentional. I picked up my fork. My food had gone cold. But then I looked up and saw Lorraine whispering to Astria. A moment later, Astria stood glass in hand. "I know we're all so thankful to be together," she said with that voice, the one that always sounded rehearsed. "But before we go on, there's something we need to clear up. Something serious." Every face turned toward her, then slowly toward me, and I understood. The folding chair wasn't just a message. It was a warning. They dimmed the lights in the dining room just after Astria's toast, and everyone began shuffling toward the living room like it was some grand procession. The same room we'd gathered in every Christmas Eve since we were kids, now filled with adult tension, glittering paper, and a smell of vanilla-scented candles, too strong to be warm. I followed last, not because I was being dramatic. I just didn't feel like walking into another spotlight meant for someone else. My chair creaked as I sat down. Not that anyone noticed. I might as well have been a coat rack. Laughter floated through the room as Astria twirled in her heels, with a plate of cookies flanked by Dorian and his girlfriend, who couldn't stop talking about her Pilates studio in Palo Alto. On the coffee table, gifts were piled high, color-coded, tagged, and sparkling. I searched quickly with my eyes. Nothing. There was a gift bag from me. I'd placed it under the tree earlier. A small box of hand-poured candles I'd made with lavender from Dad's old garden. I had written a simple note to Mom and Dad for quiet nights. Love, Maura. It was gone. Not opened, not on display, just gone. I tried not to overthink it. Maybe it had fallen behind the tree. Maybe someone put it in the wrong pile. Maybe it would show up. Instead of scanning the tree again, I reached for my phone, mostly to anchor myself. My fingers scrolled out of habit, but my brain whispered something I didn't want to hear. So I opened the forwarded email from cousin Janine. I remembered asking her for the address last week. She had sent it without question. I clicked details, and there it was, an empty field that didn't include me. Janine had added my name manually as a separate forward. I hadn't been included in the original email. I hadn't even been invited. The fake smile on my face stayed in place out of pure muscle memory. But inside, something shifted. The kind of shift you feel in your chest when someone says "no offense" before saying something that slices you anyway. That sting crawled slowly through my ribs. I didn't belong here. I was in the room, but I hadn't been counted. I slipped the phone back into my lap. My jaw clenched, but I didn't say anything. I'd trained myself well. That's when I felt a small tug at my sweater. I looked down. Vada. She was 9 now. Same wide eyes I remembered from the last birthday I attended, before the invitations quietly stopped coming. "Hey, kiddo," I whispered, trying to sound normal. She held half a cookie crumbs trailing her sleeve. "Aunt Maura." "Yeah." "Is it true you used to steal from Grandma?" I blinked. What she said. "You always take credit for stuff you didn't do, but it's okay now. I guess we're not supposed to talk about it." The words sat between us like cold soup. "What? Who told you that, Mom, but I'm not supposed to say?" Vader nibbled the edge of her cookie. "I think it's old stuff, like before I was born." I felt a small tear sting the inside of my eye. Not because of what Vada said. She was just repeating what she'd been taught, but because the damage was already done. "Vad!" Astria's voice called from across the room. She vaulted over with the same poise she wore when she used to lead Sunday school plays. "Sweetheart, come help me pass out these." Vada skewered away. Astria's gaze lingered on me for a moment, half smile, eyes empty, and then she turned and walked off. I sat there, the blood behind my ears, pounding like a warning bell. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just a pattern of oversight. It was character assassination, carefully crafted, shared in whispers, coated in just enough sugar to sound like concern. I leaned back and stared at the fireplace, silent, useless, just like I was supposed to be. I remembered the night I'd paid Dad's rehab bill. He was too ashamed to tell anyone he'd relapsed. I'd driven down from Sacramento, signed the forms, paid from my savings. Not even a thank you. He just said, "Don't tell your mother." This Astria posted on Facebook that night. "So proud of our family coming together in hard times." She got 100 likes. I got overdraft notices. I'd let it go, because family, because image, because no one likes the sibling who makes a scene. But tonight, even the children were carrying the message that I was some sort of liar, a thief, an outsider, and I wasn't even given the dignity of correcting it. I finished my wine in 2 slow sips. The lights on the tree blinked in a rhythm that felt rehearsed, like everything else in this house. From across the room, Astria whispered something to Dorian. He glanced at me, and then they both turned their backs. I didn't get up when everyone returned to the dining table. I waited until the last laugh faded, and the scraping chairs stopped echoing across the hardwood floors. Then, as if on cue, I stood, gathered my empty glass, and walked back into the room I was born in but no longer belonged to. The plates for dessert were already out. Apple and peon pies, store-bought, but fluffed up with whipped cream and the illusion of tradition. Someone had lit a cinnamon candle in the center of the table, and its scent curled around me like smoke. My chair hadn't moved still, just slightly apart from the others, a hair's breadth, but emotionally it might as well have been across the street. I sat down. Astria tapped her spoon sharply against her wineglass. The room fell quiet attention, shifting instantly to her like a reflex. "I'd like to say something before we cut the pie," she said with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. I stiffened. The room expected another toast, maybe something about gratitude or the meaning of family. But she cleared her throat and said it in a tone I'll never forget. "Give back the $90,000 or you'll never see Mom and Dad again." No one moved. I thought I'd misheard. Aunt Shirley let out a soft gasp. Vader froze mid-bite. Dorian's girlfriend slowly set down her wineglass. I turned my head slowly, trying to catch a smirk on Astria's face. Some sign this was an ill-timed joke. There wasn't one. "What did you just say?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Dorian, who'd been silent most of the evening, jumped in like a second act. "You moved money out of Mom's estate last year when you said it was to cover hospice bills. We saw the statements. Every one of us." My hands tightened around the edge of the table. "You think I stole from her?" I asked, my voice cracked but calm. "No," Astria replied, leaning back casually. "We're not accusing you. We're demanding you give it back. There's a difference." The air turned dense, like a curtain had dropped between me and reality. I looked at Lorraine, my mother, but her eyes were on her lap. Her napkin suddenly seemed fascinating. "I used my own savings," I said slowly. "That wasn't from her estate. That was mine." Astria didn't blink. "Then why were there no receipts? Why no documentation? Why does it look like you drained the joint account the week Dad entered palliative care?" I opened my mouth, but stopped. Because she was right. There wasn't any trail. Dad had asked me to keep it quiet. I paid up front for the experimental trial when Medicare wouldn't. He said, "Don't let your mother know. It'll stress her out more than the cancer." And so I didn't. There had been no witness, no receipt, just my word. And apparently, in this room, that word was worthless. "Wow," I said softly, scanning their faces I once trusted. "You really planned this." "We didn't plan anything," Dorian said, shaking his head. "We just wanted the truth, and we want our money back." I almost laughed. Your money, Vader, seated beside him, mumbled without looking up. "Told you she stole." The words sliced me open more than Astria's accusation ever could. I turned to Lorraine again, desperate, still thinking. Maybe she would look at me and say, "Stop, this isn't right. Maura would never." But she didn't. She just folded her napkin neatly and placed it beside her untouched plate. That was my answer. My mouth was dry. My heart not broken, burning. I reached into myself for a memory that felt solid. 3 years ago, when the insurance company denied the final treatment, Round Dad had called me directly. "Mora," he'd said, voice thin. "I know I don't deserve it, but I think this might give me a few more months." I transferred $90,000 from my account that night. He never made it to the trial, but the payment had been made without hesitation, without a paper trail. And now it was a noose they were pretending was a ribbon. I looked up again. Astria was smiling with her lips. Dorian was nodding like a reasonable man at a shareholder meeting. Lorraine still hadn't looked at me once. "This isn't about money," I said quietly. "This is about rewriting history again." Dorian scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. I leaned in, my voice calm. "You corner me, accuse me in front of the entire family, and tell me I won't be allowed to see Mom and Dad unless I pay you ransom, and I'm being dramatic." Astria waved a hand. "You're twisting it." "No," I said. "I'm finally untwisting it." They didn't see it, but inside something shifted. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't hoping for anyone to defend me. I wasn't reaching for their version of love. I was looking at a table full of people who had rehearsed their lines, who knew when the beat would drop, who waited until dessert to take the final bite out of me. And I had finally lost the appetite to play along. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I looked at Astria dead in the eye and whispered to myself, "You're not asking for money. You're asking for silence." And I was done being quiet. The murmurs didn't stop immediately. They lingered like perfume after someone has left the room, faint but unmistakable. I sat there still. No one looked my way. Not Astria, not Dorian, not even Lorraine. The pie sat untouched at the center of the table, slowly losing warmth like the room itself. I pushed my chair back gently and stood muttering something about needing air. No one asked if I was okay. No one followed. I made my way to the kitchen, not even bothering to fake a smile this time. The clatter of forks and fake laughter from the dining room trailed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I leaned against the counter for a moment, hands still curled tight around my phone, like a lifeline I hadn't quite cut yet. That's when I saw it. Dad's old laptop. Lorraine still used it for basic things. Checking emails, watching sermon replays, organizing Christmas cards. It was open probably from earlier, when she'd been printing place cards minus mine. I sat down less because I wanted to snoop, and more because my legs just didn't want to hold me anymore. The desktop was still open. No password. I clicked the email icon out of habit, more than intent, not expecting to find anything, just looking for something to focus on. That wasn't my own breath coming too fast, too loud. Her inbox was cluttered. Promotions, unread church newsletters, a half-drafted reply to Aunt Shirley, and then drafts. I clicked. There were dozens. Most were empty or titled with placeholders, but one stood out. Subject line: "Tomorrow, I wish you knew." Dated 6 months ago. I stared at it. My hand hovered over the trackpad for a second longer, as if opening it would confirm something I didn't yet want confirmed. And then I clicked. It opened with no password. Her words filled the screen in that flat black font she always used. Times New Roman. Always 12-point. You paid for everything, I know that. I'm not blind. I just didn't know how to tell Astria she's not the golden one. You do things with your whole heart. That terrifies me. There was more, but I didn't need to read further. I read it twice anyway, maybe 3 times. Each time a different sentence hit harder. The words weren't cruel. They weren't kind either. They were honest. And that was the worst part. She knew. She had known. All this time she saw what I did, what I gave, what I carried. And she still chose to sit in silence, while her other children tore me apart. She had her chance tonight. She could have stood up, but she stayed quiet. Not because she didn't believe me, but because she did. She didn't protect me because she didn't want to upset Estrella. She didn't want to shift the family's mythos, its neatly packaged illusion, where Astria was the golden girl and I was the bitter spare. I shut the laptop slowly. Outside, someone was laughing again. Dessert had resumed. I could hear forks tapping plates, and someone singing a line from a Mariah Carey song slightly off key. In that moment, I wasn't just excluded. I was sacrificed. I caught my reflection in the microwave door across from the sink. My lipstick had faded. My eyes looked tired in a way concealer couldn't fix. For a second, I didn't recognize myself. Not because I'd changed, but because I finally saw what they saw when they looked at me. An easy scapegoat, a placeholder daughter, a woman they only remembered existed when they needed a check, a right, a favor. And they remembered quickly. I stood there letting the weight of Lorraine's unsent message settle over me. Years ago, after I paid off the last of the mortgage on this very house, Lorraine left me a voicemail. It was short, mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. "We're grateful. I mean, I know you don't like praise, but thank you." I deleted it. Back then, I told myself actions mattered more than words. That love didn't need to be performed to be real. But now I wish I'd kept that voicemail. At least it had been something. Not a draft, not a ghost. I closed my eyes and took one last breath in that kitchen. Then I walked back into the dining room. They were halfway through pie. No one looked up, not even Vaude. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair. Astria raised an eyebrow without pausing her bite. Leaving already, I didn't reply right away. I pulled my scarf from the hook by the door, wrapped it around my neck slowly, purposefully. Then I turned to her and said, "Tell Mom I found her draft." And then I walked out, coat half-buttoned, dignity intact. The next morning, I found myself sitting at a corner table in a nearly empty cafe, 2 blocks from my apartment. The coffee had gone cold in front of me, untouched. I wasn't reading. I wasn't scrolling. I was just holding space. My mind played that draft email over and over, like a broken loop. Lorraine's voice, even through typed words, kept echoing inside me. "You do things with your whole heart." That terrifies me. I wanted it to stop. I needed something to break the cycle. I reached for my purse, half expecting to grab my earbuds, maybe distract myself with music, but my fingers brushed against an envelope instead. Thick cream-colored. I remembered it now. Astria had handed it to me earlier that week after brunch. Just an update, she'd said, waving it like it was nothing. Paperwork Mom wants everyone to have. At the time, I'd shoved it into my bag without looking. I didn't want to think about more documents, more reminders of shared responsibilities that always fell to me but never returned to me. Now, though, I opened it. Inside was a copy of their newly revised will. I unfolded it slowly. The legal wording was dense, written in the same cold, polished tone all lawyers seem to favor, designed to say everything, while meaning as little as possible. My name wasn't there. Not once, not under the home, not under the joint savings, not under the life insurance, not even a personal item listed for sentimental value. I flipped the pages twice, then a third time. Nothing. A line near the end said it all. "Mora has been provided for outside of this will." I hadn't been. That sentence was fiction, a formal lie dressed in official language. I stared at the paper like it might rearrange itself if I looked long enough. My coffee sat untouched. My heart didn't even ache. It simply stalled. I wasn't just erased, I was replaced. Years ago, I'd been set to receive 40% of the estate. I didn't ask for it. I never counted on it. But the fact it had once existed meant something. It acknowledged that I mattered. Now it was all to Astria and Dorian. Just like that. I'd spent so many years filling in the gaps, paying for Dad's clinical trial, when Medicare didn't cover it, refinancing my own condo, to help renovate their kitchen covering property taxes when Lorraine lost track of due dates. I never asked for applause. I never even asked for repayment. But this was a message, not a mistake. A message. You're not part of this family anymore, not in spirit, not in paper. My hands trembled, not from rage, not from heartbreak. It was the stillness of realizing something inside me had quietly shattered, and the sound had gone unheard. Later that evening, after avoiding every call and ignoring every checking-in text from neighbors who'd probably seen the Facebook post Astria made about hard family decisions, I got a message from Dorian. "Can we meet?" I didn't respond right away, but I knew I would. An hour later, I slid into the passenger seat of his car, parked under a flickering streetlight, outside the old high school. Neither of us said anything for a moment. He didn't look at me, just stared out the windshield, like he was watching fog form on the glass. I tried to slow her down, he said finally. Mom wouldn't stop her. My voice stayed level. You didn't try hard enough. He nodded like he expected that. You shouldn't have found out that way. I shouldn't have found out at all. He shifted, finally glancing over. It wasn't about money. It was about distance. You've always been on the outside, Mora. Maybe this just put it on paper. I looked at him then and saw a brother I no longer recognized. Why didn't you tell me? He hesitated. Because I thought maybe you'd finally leave if you saw it in writing. The silence between us thickened, not from discomfort, but from the sheer weight of the truth finally spoken. I stepped out of the car without another word. Rain had started soft and steady, soaking through my coat before I'd made it halfway down the block. But I didn't rush. They didn't just remove my name from a will. They'd removed me from the narrative of our family, rewriting it to fit their version of events, their hierarchy, their comfort. The money didn't matter. The lies did. The intentional eraser did. The fact that they had all decided in quiet colluding moments that I was no longer worth a mention, that I could disappear, and it would be easier for them. If being forgotten was the goal, they'd finally done it. But I remember everything, and I was done staying quiet. I didn't go straight to bed that night. Instead, I walked home under a gray sky, the kind that threatened to pour but never quite followed through. The drizzle stuck to my coat like static. My boots made soft thuds on the pavement, and inside me, a quiet final shift had taken place. No more trying to be graceful, no more hoping they'd see me. By the time I stepped into my apartment, the weight of everything I hadn't said, hadn't dared to admit even to myself, pressed down like soaked wool. I locked the door behind me and kicked off my shoes. The silence in the room was soothing, predictable. At least here, nothing wrote itself when I wasn't looking. I dropped my bag on the table and walked straight to the hallway closet. Not because I needed anything, but because suddenly I needed to do something. I started cleaning, pulling open drawers, tossing out receipts I didn't need, boxing up winter scarves I hadn't worn in years. Each motion steadied me, like I was digging through the past to find something buried. And then I did. At the bottom of an old wooden tray I kept for extra cords and office supplies, a small silver thumb drive caught my eye. A piece of tape wrapped around it in fading Sharpie read Dad's Hospice and Records. I stared at it, and just like that, a switch flipped. I crossed the room, plugged it into my laptop, and waited for the files to load. Inside folder after folder appeared clean organized. My old self had been meticulous. Medical invoices, email printouts, transfer logs notes I'd written to remind myself who had said what on which phone call. And there it was, a PDF dated almost 3 years ago. $90,000 wire transfer to Mountain View Hospice Trust. I opened it. It was from my personal checking account. Not Lorraine's, not the estate. Mine. Time-stamped, verified, final. Every doubt they'd tried to plant about me, every accusation, every twisted retelling this document cut through it like glass. But that wasn't all. I opened another folder labeled Estate Communications. Inside were emails from our family's former attorney. I had backed them up when Dad was first hospitalized. One attachment caught my eye. The scanned version of an early draft of the will from 4 years ago. My name clear as day, listed next to 40% of the estate, alongside specific items from my father's study he'd said were meant for the one who remembered. I exhaled slowly. Then I reached for the updated copy Astria had handed me. The one that erased me. I opened both side by side. Something felt off. It took a few minutes before I saw it. The signature Lorraine's on the new version. Her cursive was uneven, slanted backward. The L lacked its usual loop. I opened the old birthday card she'd written me in October, still on my fridge. Compared the two, not even close. I zoomed in on both screens. The signature on the will wasn't just odd, it wasn't hers. My pulse steadied. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt precise. I'd spent the better part of 2 decades quietly untangling financial knots for other people, reviewing trust documents, identifying forgery, building airtight audit trails. They forgot who they were dealing with. I whispered out loud, as if testing the words for weight. You want to come for me with legal documents? I smiled just slightly. You chose the wrong sister. I began dragging files into a new folder, rebuilding timelines, labeling evidence. Then I pulled out my phone and texted someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Me? Hey, I might have something for you just hypothetically. She was a compliance attorney at the district attorney's office. She'd seen me hold my own in federal audits. We weren't friends, but we had mutual respect. Her reply came in under a minute. Her. Got time after the holiday, want coffee or war room setup? I smiled. Me? Let's say both. I'll bring the files. I didn't need a lawsuit, not yet. But I needed the truth out of the shadows. This wasn't about revenge. It was about record. Because when they tried to rewrite the past, they forgot one thing. I kept the receipts. I didn't sleep the night after I found the files. But I wasn't restless. I was resolute. In the early hours, I sat at my kitchen table, with coffee gone cold and the faint hum of the fridge keeping me company. The folder on my desktop was complete. The audio clips trimmed, the statements labeled, "The chain of custody secure." By mid-morning, a text from Dorian appeared. Dorian, Astria wants to smooth things over. Christmas dinner round 2. Just family. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a casual attempt to smooth things over like I'd spilled wine on a tablecloth. I stared at the message, then typed 2 words. Let's finish it. I dressed like it was a regular Thursday. No drama, no confrontation in my posture. But I did change my earrings. They were small silver drops my father once gave me when I got promoted. Symbolic, maybe, but I needed the reminder. Before I left, I slipped a manila envelope into my tote and tapped one last icon on my phone. The folder labeled Redemption. The drive back to the house felt surreal, almost like returning to the scene of a crime. And maybe I was. The same front door, the same wreath, the same 2 perfect lighting Astria always insisted on, dimming just enough to look warm in photos. But this time, I didn't pause on the porch. I walked in. The dining room looked nearly identical to a week ago, minus the folding chair. It was gone. In its place, a regular seat, unmarked, unlabeled, but everyone else had place cards. I didn't. Not again. Astria greeted me with her version of politeness, teeth clenched behind glossed lips. Glad you made it, she said. We just want peace, you know. I nodded once. I brought something just in case the truth wanted to join us this time. Dorian shifted in the corner. Lorraine fussed with a candle that didn't need fixing. I laid my phone gently on the center of the table, face down, no words. Let them squirm a little first. Dinner began like a bad script. Casual banter, half-hearted questions about work and the weather. But no one looked at me for long. Even Vader, once so curious, kept her eyes on her plate. I waited until coffee was poured. Then I tapped play. The room froze at the sound of Maribel's voice, our family made for over a decade. The recording was clear. She told me not to dust the side drawer. That's where she kept the backup. Will said she'd clean it up before anyone noticed. I didn't want trouble. Lorraine's spoon clattered into her cup. Estrella's smile vanished like fog in sunlight. Dorian pressed his lips together, his gaze fixed on the tablecloth. But I wasn't done. Clip 2. Astria's laugh filled the room. A recording taken during one of her wine-fueled backyard parties. A clip I hadn't meant to capture. But the truth has a funny way of saving itself. Mora's too quiet to fight back. She'll probably cry and disappear. That's her thing. Besides, once it's in writing, it's real. No one checks signatures. They just sign where I say. I didn't look around immediately. I let them feel it. When I finally raised my eyes, Lorraine was pale. Dorian stared out the window. Astria. Astria didn't blink. I took a sip of my water, then placed a sealed envelope beside my phone and slid it toward the center. This, I said calmly, is a formal report prepared for the district attorney's office. It includes financial records, forgery assessments, and witness statements. You have until New Year's. No one spoke. I stood up, pulled my chair in gently, and adjusted the strap of my bag. Don't worry, I added, glancing at Lorraine. I won't make a scene. Lorraine's eyes welled, but she didn't say a word. Astria opened her mouth, but no sound came for once, and I walked out. 3 days passed. I didn't hear from Astria Lorraine or Dorian, but I didn't expect to. The fallout from Christmas Round 2 was still floating in the air like ash after a fire. Then, at 6:11 a.m., I got the voicemail. It was from Human Resources at my firm. Hi, Maura. Sorry to bother you this early. There's something we need to discuss immediately. A recording surfaced overnight. It's sensitive. Someone claims it's you in the clip, saying you've manipulated estate records and forged documents. Legal's reviewing it. We need to meet today. I didn't even finish my coffee. My thumb shook as I tapped the screen and opened the link they'd sent. There I was, my voice anyway, spliced together, to say words I'd never strung in that order. Covering trails, forging language. Doesn't matter, they'll believe me anyway. Fake but precise, deliberate. I paused it, took a breath, played it again. It was my voice, my tone, my pauses. And yet I'd never said that. Not in that order, not like that. I knew immediately Astria she'd hit back. For a moment, I sat frozen in my car outside the office, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles widened. What if they believe her? I whispered to no one. That old fear crept in of being the one who overreacts, who sees ghosts, who pushes too hard, and ends up looking unstable. I thought of all the times I kept my mouth shut to keep peace, to be the bigger person. And now my silence was being weaponized. But I didn't walk into that office shaking. I walked in with my head held level and my voice low. I didn't say what's in that tape, and I can prove it. They listened. Legal pulled in the compliance team. Forensics took over. I left them with everything they needed. And then I went home. That night, just as I finished organizing more files for the DA, a knock came at my door. It was Dorian. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. No coat, just a hoodie and jeans soaked at the sleeves. I can't do this anymore, he said. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and handed it to me. She used editing software. I found the project file on her desktop. It had the raw audio from last year, stuff you recorded at Dad's bedside. She cut and spliced it. He took a shaky breath. I didn't help her, but I didn't stop her either. I thought she'd just rant and move on. I stared at him. My hand stayed still. My voice didn't raise. You thought wrong. He looked at the floor. Is it too late to fix it? No, I said, but you won't be the one to fix it. I closed the door without saying goodbye. That night, I sent everything. His drive, my files, every email chain, and invoice copy to my firm's legal team. The verification came quickly. Audio tampering, document falsification, and clear digital breadcrumbs leading back to Astria's user ID. The firm cleared me. No suspension, no reprimand, just quiet vindication. Then, I gave the same package, neatly bound to a lawyer, who owed me a favor from 5 years back, one who worked across the street from Astria's PR agency. And just for good measure, the DA's office received a copy sealed, logged with the dates and metadata already certified. I didn't need a headline. I just needed it on record. The next evening, I got in my car again, but not to fight to finish. I drove to my parents' house for the last time. The porch light was on. The living room glowed amber through the blinds. I could see Lorraine in the kitchen alone, washing something small and delicate. She opened the door after 2 knocks. We didn't say anything. I stepped in just far enough to reach the console table by the stairs. I pulled the small handkerchief from my coat pocket. Olive green embroidered with a single M, the one she always tucked into her Bible. The one I saw in her purse that night, even after saying she didn't keep old things. I laid it down on the table, right on top of the photo frame, with our childhood picture. You kept this, I said. I saw it. She didn't deny it. You don't have to say anything, I continued. You already did. Then I turned and walked out. The next morning, news broke quietly. An internal memo circulated at Astria's firm. She was suspended pending investigation into digital fraud. By noon, the memo leaked. By nightfall, she was gone. No press conference, no grand statement, just silence. And I didn't have to raise my voice once. It had been a month since everything cracked wide open. That night, when the voice that had tried to erase me finally went quiet, didn't bring fireworks or applause, just stillness. And in that stillness, something inside me finally settled. Now, on a quiet Sunday evening, I sat on the porch with Vad. She was curled up beside me on the swing, sketching something on the back of an old grocery list. Her feet didn't quite reach the floor. The porch creaked under our quiet weight. The sky was soft, a stretch of lavender and apricot, like the world was trying to apologize without saying it out loud. Vader's backpack leaned against the side of the bench. She'd been living with me part-time now, a result of Lorraine stepping back from everything and everyone. Astria's legal team was still scrambling to contain the fallout. Dorian had relocated to Oregon, sending one guarded text before disappearing from the family thread altogether. But I didn't think about them often anymore. Not in the same way. I was learning how to make space for the people who stayed. Vader broke the silence without looking up from her sketchpad. "Why don't we go over there anymore?" I didn't answer right away. The question wasn't sharp, just honest, soft, and curious, the way children ask questions adults have long buried. Because I said gently, "Some places stop being home, even if your name's still on the mailbox." She nodded slowly, then scribbled another line on her paper. "I like it better here anyway." That made me smile. Not the kind of smile you wear for others, but the kind that seeps out from your ribs when something old starts healing. I reached over and smoothed her hair behind her ear. "I like it better here, too." After she went to bed, I stood in the doorway of her room for a while, just watching her breathe, arms flung out over the covers, like she trusted the world not to pull them away. Then I went to my own room and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. It had moved with me across 5 addresses and 3 promotions. I'd almost thrown it out once, twice. Inside, among a few old letters and faded photographs, was the olive green handkerchief folded still clean, still soft. I laid it across my nightstand, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. Underneath it, I slipped a note I had written on the back of a payroll envelope, just one sentence. "Home is not a place, it's who still waits for you, and sometimes that means you." The next morning, my firm sent an announcement. I'd been promoted. I would now oversee a new program, one I helped pitch, but never thought I'd lead. A financial empowerment initiative focused on women who've been quietly stripped of their inheritance, their legal standing, or their dignity inside families that used love as leverage. It wasn't just numbers. It was personal. Each class I led began with the same question. What's the first thing someone took from you without asking? And every session, someone always cried. Not because they were sad, but because they realized they weren't crazy or alone. I didn't need a trophy for that. I just needed to show up. Later that week, I got a voice message. It was from Dorian. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, his voice quieter than I remembered. "Just thank you for not dragging me down with her." I didn't reply, but I saved the message. Maybe not for him, maybe for me. A reminder that even those who stand silently beside cruelty eventually feel the heat of its consequences. The truth didn't need to roar. It just needed to be steady. As the sun dipped again into dusk, I stepped back out to the porch. Vad was already asleep. A small blanket tugged up to her chin. The air was crisp. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. I'd stopped waiting for someone to come back and make it all right. The apology never came. Neither did the handwritten letter. The will wasn't rewritten. There was no redemption arc, no reunion hug. But in all that absence, I found something else. A deeper kind of peace. The kind that doesn't need permission. The kind that teaches you not everything broken needs to be rebuilt. Some things are meant to be left behind, so you can walk forward lighter. Because sometimes the only family that matters is the one who never asked you to disappear in the first